Well, hello everyone and welcome to Northshore Online. My name is Samantha. It is so good to have each and every one of you with us this morning. We've got a great morning planned, so we're really glad that you're here. We're going to get started with worship as always in just a moment. But before we do that, if you could just say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're watching from and maybe how we can be praying for you this week. That's something that's really unique and special about this online community is that we get the opportunity to do that each and every Sunday. So say hello, let us know where you're watching from, and again, how we can be praying for you. And if this is your first time joining us, we are so glad that you're here today. Some of you might be coming back because last week was your first time. We had an amazing guest speaker. Brendan McDonough was here to just share a little bit more about his story. So if you are returning from last week, welcome back. We're really glad that you're here, and we would love to hear where you're watching from as well in the chat. But we're in this series called Let's Talk About It. We're having conversations about faith and mental health. It has been incredible. We've heard so many stories of people just saying, like, I needed this. This was something that is so happening and so present right now in my life. And I know I can say that personally for me too. This has just been an amazing series. So we've got another great message to share with you today as well. So we're going to get started with that, but worship is first. Thanks again for joining us, and welcome to Northshore Online.
Welcome to Northshore. If you're in this room or online, it's going to be a great day. Let's get to our feet and worship Jesus together. Here we go. All right, let's sing these powerful words together. Let praise be a weapon that silences the enemy. Let praise be a weapon that conquers all anxiety. Let it rise. Let praise arise. Sing your name in the dark and it changes everything. We sing with all we are and we claim your victory. Sing it. Let it rise. Let praise arise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. You cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. that calms the storm inside of me. Gonna let it rise. Let faith arise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. You cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. Come on. This is what living looks like. You can do it.
This is what
Freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we pray. Keep going. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. We will not survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you.
They say this mountain can't be moved. They say these chains will never break. But they don't know you like we do. There is power in your name. We've heard that there is no way through. We've heard the tide will never change. They haven't seen what you can
unbreakable. God, we believe. God, we believe for it. From the impossible, we'll see a miracle. God, we believe. God, we believe for it. Move the immovable, break the unbreakable. God, we believe. God, we believe for it. From the impossible, we'll see a miracle. God, we believe. God, we believe for it.
Yes. Well, good morning, everyone. You guys can go ahead and take your seats. Welcome to Northshore. Man, it is so good to be back with you guys again today. If we haven't met yet, my name's Stephen Bolt, and I just want to say welcome, especially if this is your first time. We are so excited that you're choosing to spend some time with us here today. Here's the first thing you need to know is here at Northshore, we believe that Jesus can change everything for anyone. It's not something we just like say or throw up on the walls. No matter what you're coming in with today, what your church experience is, if you've never been to church before, Jesus can change everything for anyone. We're super excited that you're here today. And if this is your first time, I want to invite you. There's a connection card in the seat back pocket in front of you, or if you're online, there's a QR code that you can scan. Pull out that connection card. You'll see a bunch of next steps on there, a spot where you can put anything you're praying about right now, anything we can be praying for. But one of the check boxes on there just says, I'm new. I'd bet you can check that after this experience. You can take that out to the guest service table out there. I'd love to meet you. And if you are online, we see you. We're so excited you're with us today. You can let us know on that connection card as well. I'm going to be jumping in the chat right after this to say hi, so you can throw it in the chat. I'm new, and I'd love to say hello to you as well. But last weekend was an incredible weekend. If you weren't able to join us, I'd encourage you to go back and watch it. We got to do a really special interview with Brendan McDonough, who is here. And I actually woke up on Monday morning to an alert from our stream provider, the people who take care of getting what happens here out into the world. And they were just like, hey, something happened yesterday. You guys went way over what we expected viewership. Is everything okay? And it was just a cool thing. I went from there to looking back at Sunday and just for the last few months to see what's been happening at Northshore Online. And I got to take a look at this map that just illustrates the magnitude of what's happening in these four walls and how it's getting broadcast out into the world. It was incredible. I literally got emotional thinking about, this is something we can celebrate. A couple years ago in 2019, I got to sit over in Glacier Room and have a conversation with people just talking about, what the impact of Northshore Online could be. What could happen if we chose to invest in this and sacrifice by all of these people that are serving up here on cameras and this incredible technology happening. What could happen? Who could hear this message? And just to be able to look at that map and just be encouraged, and to see the people, not only we can look at all those pins and see a ton of people watching, but those people are taking steps, giving their lives to Jesus, making decisions to get baptized, to give generously, people all over the world. And so I just want to encourage you guys with that. Don't believe for a moment that what happens here on Sundays is contained to these four walls. This is the church, and it's just been incredible to see. And so I want to thank you. If you're a part of giving, know that all the technology in this room, it doesn't just magically appear. It's through so many of you guys that give each week and sacrifice, saying, we believe that this gospel, this word of hope and joy needs to go out into the world, and that's happening. And so thank you. And if you haven't taken that step yet, I just want to encourage you. Today can be the day to do that. You can give over at northshore.church/give or at the boxes on your way out. But God is going to continue doing incredible things. I'm telling you guys, this next season, God's telling me it's like a season of faith stepping into that. More and more is going to happen as we continue to say, like, God, we trust you with our time, our finances. We trust you even with what this experience looks like. God's going to continue moving in powerful ways, and it's a great opportunity to jump in and be a part of it. Over the last few weeks, we've been in this series called Let's Talk About It, a conversation on faith and mental health. It's been so powerful to see so many people, again, taking next steps, getting plugged into our groups and the free counseling that we're offering and so many other things. And this week we have an incredible message from Pastor Scotty, who's just talking about something I think we all can relate to on some level, anxiety. Super excited you're here. It's going to be an incredible message. We're going to check this out and then welcome Scotty up. But again, welcome to Northshore.
Well, welcome to Northshore. It's so good to see those of you who have decided to be with us here in this room. And I want to say hi to everybody who's joining us online as well today. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Scotty Scruggs. I'm the pastor here. I'm really glad that you're here as we've been walking through these conversations on faith and mental health. And what that means is we're talking about how faith intersects with the emotions you feel and the self-image you carry and the discouragement you face. And for what we're talking about today, the worries that you battle. I didn't have the language for it when I was growing up, but when I was growing up, I tended to worry a lot. It was just kind of part of how I was wired. When I was a kid, I worried about what my parents thought about me and what other people thought about me. When I was at school, I worried about my grades. When I was in high school, I worried about going out on dates. I didn't actually go on any dates, but I worried how they would go if I did go on any dates. When I was in college, I worried about what I would study. When I was out of college, I worried about what career I should pursue. When I was single, I worried about finding someone to marry. Maybe some of you have been there where you're finding that person that God wants me to commit the rest of my life to. In fact, I remember thinking, if I ever got married, then I wouldn't have to worry anymore. Because marriage is just this never-ending flow of conjugal bliss, right? You can ask Nina how that went over for her, okay? So you might think that my worries would have eased when I stepped into ministry, when I responded to God's call in my life to be a pastor, that somehow that would relieve me of my propensity to worry. But it didn't. In fact, true story, and I don't talk about this a lot, but I used to get so anxious before I would speak that I would wear 2 or 3 or even 4 shirts under my shirt so people couldn't see how much I was sweating, how anxious I actually was. And then in my early 30s, I decided to see a counselor. I felt just kind of stuck, and so I decided to see a counselor. And I told you this a few weeks ago. I remember the day the counselor looked me in the eye and said, "Scotty, you have anxiety." And as I told you then, my first response was, "No, I don't. I'm a pastor. My job is to help people who have anxiety." But I knew she was right, because as soon as she said it, I started to feel anxious, because that's what people with worry do, right? We feel anxious. But what I didn't tell you a few weeks ago is how angry I got about this. How angry I felt primarily at God for calling me into ministry. I'd just given everything in my life to go be a pastor, and this is what I'm now dealing with, worry. It felt so weak. It felt so pathetic, if you will. And then after the anger, the discouragement began to set in. I thought to myself, well, how can I ever be successful at what I do? And how will people trust me if I want to lead? Or how will I be able to deal with this throughout my life? But mostly through all these things, I felt more and more and more alone. Just alone. Anxiety, by definition, is an isolating experience because it's all happening up in your head, right? You can be around people and feel deeply alone and anxious about what's going on in your life. But here's a little bit of good news for those of you who have this kind of struggle or temperament or propensity in your life to feel worry or anxiety. The good news is you're not alone. I wasn't alone. I didn't know this. I was not alone. You're not alone. The reality is, and this is true for today, over 60% of people in this country experience worry or anxiety on a regular basis. And over 20% have actually been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, such as social anxiety disorder, or panic attacks, or obsessive compulsive disorder, or a phobia of some kind. And these challenges, by the way, aren't just challenges that adults are facing today. There are challenges that the next generation is facing in extreme ways. In fact, there's a new study that was released from the University of Calgary that shows that 1 out of 4 children today experience excessive fear and worry in their life. And that's over twice what it was before the pandemic. And here's what makes this so tricky to talk about. There's no single cause when it comes to anxiety, right? It can be triggered by a decision you're making. It can be triggered by a problem you're trying to solve or manage. It can be triggered by a relationship issue you're trying to navigate. It can be triggered by your past, your family of origin, a traumatic experience you're trying to work through. There's even, get this, there's even a genetic trait that you can inherit that makes you more at risk for experiencing anxiety. And those of you who have anxiety are now panicked inside. I have that gene, I know it, that must be me, right? And sometimes there's no clear trigger at all. Some people have a version of what's called generalized anxiety disorder, which is a persistent and excessive worry about everyday decisions and situations that may not have any kind of cause or trigger at all. And here's the thing about this kind of anxiety. It can impair your ability to get through life. It can interfere with relationships and intimacy and trust. And it can take a huge toll on a person's physical health and even spiritual health. And the greater the impairment, the greater the need for professional or therapeutic intervention. I just want to name that in the beginning as we walk into this, whether it's counseling or medication. And if you're dealing with chronic paralyzing anxiety that's keeping you from making progress in life, if you're at home right now watching and you feel like I can't even get up, I feel so worried, a counselor is your next step. I just want to name that right now. A sermon will not be enough. A counselor is your next step. And by the way, if you need help with that or help finding out what the next step is, you can text us anytime. We've said this throughout the series. You can text reach out to 97000 and we'll help you find the next step you need or the counselor that you need. And by the way, if you can't afford counseling, we'll help provide the first month of counseling for you so you can take that step. But for the rest of the message today, what I want to do is talk through how I believe God responds to us when we're in those moments of paralyzing anxiety. And to do that, we're gonna go back to our same story, the one that we've been in the last 4 weeks. You're probably getting sick of the story. You're probably getting sick of hearing about it. Well, we're here for a couple more weeks, so don't get too sick yet. Back to our same story about this famous prophet in the Old Testament named Elijah. This seemingly courageous guy who stood up to this really bad king named Ahab. And then they threatened Elijah's life, and Elijah had to run for his life. And that's where we pick up the story. This is in 1 Kings 19, verse 3. The story begins, and again, you know this by now. Elijah was afraid, and he ran for his life. Now we're gonna pause here for just a moment and just spend a moment reflecting on how the entire story, everything that happens, all that we're learning begins in a moment of fear. Fear is the context of this entire thing. And I would argue fear can often be construed or seen as this must be a moment of weakness or cowardice. But if you think about the actual story and what comes next, fear, this moment of fear is actually what saved Elijah's life. Because that is what fear is designed to do. Just a quick reminder for you, a quick biology lesson on this one. Whenever your body or mind perceives a threat or danger of any kind, it triggers in you an automatic physiological response that's sometimes called fight or flight. Some of you have heard that term, fight or flight, right? You know, it's why some people get really heated in their arguments or conflict. That's kind of the fight side. And some people get really quiet or avoidant in conflict. That's the flight side. And then those two kind of people tend to pair up and get married and need therapy, right? Like that's how that goes. But regardless of your conflict style, your brain automatically in moments where you feel like there's some kind of threat or danger, you don't choose this, you don't get to think about this, it automatically floods your brain with stress hormones so that you can run faster or respond quicker without thinking. Why? Because that fear can save your life or the life of someone you love. This fear is a God-given biological system designed to save your life. For example, we have at the top of our stairs in our home a baby gate. And we keep it there because our son Jude, who just turned 3 yesterday, happy birthday, buddy, we love you. Jude, who's kind of a, Spider-Man little kid, would literally launch himself off the stairs if there wasn't something physically in his way. Well, a few months ago, Jude and I were running around playing upstairs, and I noticed that someone had left the gate open. And I saw Jude started running. He's playing and having a good time, and he starts running towards the stairs, not paying attention that the gate is actually open. And I felt in my body this surge of fear and panic. You parents know exactly what I'm talking about. It floods your whole system, and it literally propelled me off the ground, over my son to the gate where I slammed it closed right before he got there. My fear saved him from a major accident or worse. And looking back, I am so grateful that God made me to feel this kind of fear. I'm so grateful I didn't have to stop and think or come up with a plan. And I'm really, really grateful that Jude was too young to tell mommy that it was daddy who left the gate open. So I'm telling her now, and she's out there, and I'm safely up here, okay, right? Here's my point. To feel fear is not a sign of weakness or lack of faith. It's a life-saving part of how your brain and your body works, which means some level of fear or worry or anxiety is not just normal, it's necessary. Are you with me? It's really important that we begin this conversation recognizing that the goal of this and the goal of spiritual life, the goal of faith, is not to eliminate the possibility or reality of fear in our lives. The challenge is when that fear or worry or those feelings of fear or worry simply won't go away. The challenge is when your body feels that surge of stress, that surge of tension or panic, even when there's no real danger or threat, or long after the danger or threat. The challenge is, to use this example from my life, the challenge is when your whole life is filled with baby gates everywhere, right? We can't take a risk. We gotta be safe. We're always imagining the worst case scenario. We're catastrophizing is the language that sometimes psychologists will use about that. And it's kind of what we see Elijah do as the story, this moment of fear, progresses into what we're gonna find out is more of a pattern of fear. Let's go back to our text. Elijah was afraid, ran for his life. It means for, not fro, but ran for his life. We'll catch that for the next service. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servants there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. And he lay down under the bush and he fell asleep. Now, if you know the story, you remember from the past few weeks, then an angel comes, provides him with food and water. And then Elijah travels for 40 days into the wilderness, and he falls asleep in a cave. God comes in the cave, says, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And look at how Elijah responds. He says, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." I want to pause here and just spend some time thinking about this last statement. Because this is you can almost hear the worry. I'm the only one left, and now they're after me, trying to kill me too. And it's not just fear, it's sustained fear. Remember, it's 40 days since he ran away, since he ran for his life. Now he's just living in that fear. Ever just live in your fear or your worry? And you can also hear almost a kind of helplessness in his voice. They're after me. There's nothing I can actually do about this. It's a writer named Laura Turner who describes this kind of anxiety as living at the intersection of uncertainty and powerlessness. Uncertainty and powerlessness. Anyone else ever find themselves at this street corner in your life? Some of you go to this street corner when you make a decision. How's it gonna go? What am I supposed to do? What if it goes wrong? How do I know this one's right? What if God says this? I don't know what to do. You feel it powerless to know, uncertainty and powerless. Some of you go to this place when you're thinking about a loved one. There's someone that you care about. How do I help them? What am I supposed to say? How do I make sure this turns out well for them? Some of you go to this street corner when you think about the future. And what's gonna happen a few years down the road? Am I taking the right classes? Am I doing the right job? Am I gonna have enough money? How am I gonna make sure? Because I feel uncertain and I feel powerless to do anything about it. Some of you, by the way, some of you haven't just stopped by this corner or visited. Some of you have built a house right here, right? And you spend your days living at the intersection of uncertainty and powerlessness. And the longer you live there, the more anxiety begins to control your life instead of help your life. And by the way, when I say anxiety, I'm not just talking about traditional worry, if you will. There's a great psychologist named Edmund Bourne who writes about these 4 different types or personas when it comes to anxiety, and we can see all 4 of them in Elijah's story. The first and most obvious persona is the worrier, he says, and the worrier lives by these 2 words, what if? What if I don't make any friends? What if the situation doesn't turn out right? What if we don't have enough money? What if something bad happens? What if my health doesn't improve? Elijah is worried. What if they find me? Like, what if the enemies find me out here? What if I don't make it back? But this isn't the only expression or type of worry we can experience in our lives. There's another kind of worry the psychologist calls the critic. The critic lives by the words, I'm no good. I'm no good as a husband. I'm no good at my job. I'm no good at this part of my life. That criticism, that inner critic, it will generate anxiety as you walk through those thoughts. And the critic feels anxious every time he or she looks in the mirror. Some of you know that, don't you? Every time I look at the mirror, I just get a little more anxious. Third type of anxiety that he talks about is the perfectionist. A lot of you know this one. The perfectionist lives by the word, I should always be doing more, doing better grades, make the varsity team, get straight A's, be successful, be a better parent. I should always be better and better and better. The perfectionist, it's related to the critic, but instead of saying I'm no good, it's I gotta always be better. And you can hear this in Elijah when he says, I've been very zealous for you, God. As I say, I've been this great prophet. I've been following the rules. I've been doing the right stuff. Perfectionists use anxiety as a motivation to work harder. Some of you feel anxious, but it's like your fuel. You don't know what to do without anxiety, right? And that leads to frustration and burnout. And there's a 4th type of anxiety, the victim. I'll never be any different. I'll never get over this problem. I'll never not be anxious. Victim feels helpless to do anything by it. For Elijah, it's I'll never make it. I'm the only one left. I'm doomed out here, and they're gonna get me too. So just for a moment, I want everyone just to take a look at this list. And some of you have been doing this already, and just think for a moment, which one of these are you? Or 2 maybe. Some of you have all 4 of these running around in your head, right? And it makes you feel even more anxious right now in church. I'm sorry, I'm getting more anxious looking at that list, Scotty, right? And here's what's so tricky about these things. It's hard to just look at this and say, okay, go away. Go away worrier, go away critic, go away perfectionist, go away victim. It's hard to make it go away. That's part of how anxiety works. And you can see this in Elijah's life. After God calls him out of the cave, he speaks in this gentle whisper. He comes, he's with him in his presence. And you know how Elijah responds when God speaks to him? Remember, there's the fire, the earthquake, the wind, the whisper. It's this beautiful moment. People read it and use it in devotionals. It's like this powerful thing. Do you know how Elijah responds to that? Do you know the big change you see in his life? Look at this. I love this. He says, again, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, put your prophets to death by the sword, and I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too. It is not the same verse. It's a different verse. He says the same thing because he's still anxious. Because that's how it works, right? In other words, even after God speaks to him, he's still anxious about the same stuff. Anxiety, I'll often tell people, anxiety is a lot like tree sap. Ever get tree sap on your hands or your car or something? Like it is almost impossible to just pry it off. That's how it works. And I want you to see this, because if you're living with a kind of anxiety that it feels like I cannot get rid of it, you're not alone. Elijah was there with you. I love the whisper, God. My complaint is the same. My fear is the same. My anxiety is exactly the same. So what do we do? Well, before we can answer that question, we need to look at what God did when Elijah was feeling his fear. Don't start with what I need to do. What does God do? What did God do with Elijah when he was dealing with these fears? Look at the response God has. The Lord said to him, go back the way you came and to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael, the king over Aram, and anoint Jehu, the son of Nimshi, king over Israel, and anoint Elisha, the son of Shaphat from Abel Mahaloah, to succeed you as prophet. So Elijah went from there and found Elisha, son of Shaphat. Now, what's this all about? Well, I love this part of the story, first and foremost, because it's a real important observation. God doesn't rebuke his anxiety. God doesn't say, Elijah, why are you so anxious? Just trust me. Stop worrying all the time. Get over it. Look at all those people around you that aren't fearful and fretful. Just be more like them. He doesn't say that at all. Sometimes I think we assume God would say that because that's what we've heard other people say, right? Especially in the church, I feel like this has happened. Someone recently sent me an email about a church advertisement that said, don't let your worries kill you, let the church help. Kind of a goofy way to word that one. But here's the thing, a lot of time when it comes to anxiety, the church hasn't been very helpful, right? We treat anxiety or anxious people like it's something they should just be able to get over or pray out and it's all done. People can just turn it off. God doesn't tell Elijah to get over it. And therefore, neither should we. And that's the good news for all of you who may feel like I walked in today feeling anxious about something, worried about something. The message today is not just get over it. That's the good news. God doesn't rebuke our anxiety. Here's the hard news though. God doesn't remove our uncertainty either. Doesn't rebuke the anxiety, but doesn't remove the uncertainty. Just the opposite. God said to Elijah, go back the way you came, meaning go back towards the danger, towards the difficulty, go back into the uncertainty. In other words, if you think about that street corner, God does not remove the uncertainty. In other words, we're gonna drive down this road, we're gonna live on this highway every single day. Uncertainty is a part of life, nor does God guarantee that our life or your life will go a certain way. Elijah is called to go back, not knowing what's gonna happen to him. Why? Because God wants Elijah not to never feel fear, but to learn to trust when he's afraid. Do you see the difference? He wants Elijah to learn how to trust when he's anxious, when he's afraid. And you can't learn to trust if there's no uncertainty, right? Think about it this way. If I went to my wife, Nina, and said, hey, I want to try to get rid of all the uncertainty in our marriage so I can really trust you. So I've decided to get what I've called a Nina cam. And it's gonna follow you around 24/7 so I can always see what you're doing. Would that make her feel more or less trusted? If you don't know the answer, you should not get married, okay? That should be like a don't do it, okay? Less trusted, right? It's why we put a camera in our 3-year-old's room, because we don't trust him at all. Like we gotta watch him all the time, right? Building trust requires some degree of uncertainty. And you can see it all over Elijah's story. When God passes by Elijah on that mountain, Elijah hears the gentle whisper. The text says he covered his face with a cloak before he comes out of the cave. In other words, he doesn't know what's gonna happen. He doesn't know what God's gonna do. He doesn't know how God's gonna respond. How can he know? This is God we're talking about. We don't control God. We don't get to tell him what to do when it comes to our job or our relationships or our health or our future. And that means, and this is the hard news today for all of us who worry, there is no way to eliminate uncertainty from your everyday life. That job might not work out. That relationship might not go well. That cancer might come back. Uncertainty is the cost of being human. But it is also the gift of being human, because it's in the moments of uncertainty that we can actually learn to trust in God's faithfulness. Not just that we believe that he exists. So much of what we call trust is just saying, I believe God exists. But God doesn't want us just to believe he exists, but to actually trust him and believe that he's faithful. In fact, faith isn't saying to God, I'm 100% certain this is all gonna work out. That's not faith. Faith is something really, really different. Faith is saying, I'm gonna trust you, God, 100%, even though I'm not 100% certain. God, I'm gonna trust you 100%, even though I'm not 100% certain. That's faith. Even when you feel overwhelmed with anxiety, even when you feel stuck in your head, even when you feel powerless to do anything. But here's the thing about that feeling of powerlessness. And here's the good news about that street corner. No, God doesn't take away the uncertainty of being human and living in the world we live in. But here's the thing, you are not powerless. Uncertainty is a gift. Powerlessness is a lie. And you can see it in Elijah's story. God doesn't tell him, Elijah, sorry, you're stuck here. There's nothing you can do. Just the opposite. Says, go back the way you came and then anoint Hazael and Jehu and Elisha. In other words, go back to your responsibilities as a prophet. Because whenever our worries are raging, when our wheels are spinning, God will call you back to something you know. Go back to that prayer. Go back to scripture. Go back to that friend or life group that encouraged you. Go back to that exercise routine. Go back to volunteering, serving somebody else. Not because you're gonna find certainty, because it will remind you that you are not powerless. And if the anxiety is really severe, the call might be, go back to that counselor. Go back to that medication. Go back to that support group. And here's the really good news. If you're not sure what to do, you feel totally stuck, we have a group starting tomorrow here at Northshore called Getting Unstuck, which means there's a next step no matter how stuck you feel. And notice that God, the call for Elijah is back into community. In other words, God never says, don't worry. He just says, don't worry alone. Don't worry in isolation. Go back to the people you know, the people you can trust. Find people that you can worry with. It's a great antidote for worry. Find people you can worry with. But most importantly, by calling Elijah back to his role as a prophet, God is saying, your fears don't disqualify you from your ministry. Your anxieties don't disqualify you from your purpose in your life. Yes, they may be a burden. Yes, they may be unpleasant. Some of you may battle anxiety and worry for the rest of your life. To borrow the words of the Apostle Paul, anxiety may be like that thorn in the flesh that doesn't go away no matter how much you pray and pray and pray. But that does not qualify you from faithfully serving God. Again, just the opposite. Look at what Paul said about that thorn in his side. He said, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take that thorn away. But he said to me, my perfect in weakness. Scratch the word weakness, you put anxiety in if you need to. His power in your life can be made perfect even in your anxiety. Therefore, Paul says, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, my fears, my anxiety, so that Christ's power may what? Rest on me. What a great image. For when I am anxious even, then I'm strong. Do you see the inversion of the story? You don't have to get over anxiety to be strong. In fact, living with anxiety is what takes real strength. It takes more courage to live with anxiety than live without it. It takes courage to ask for help. It takes courage to get counseling or take medication. It takes courage to trust that God is actually bigger than your fears. Someone recently asked me, Scotty, do you still get anxious before speaking? And the answer, sometimes. There are mornings where my wheels start spinning and my body feels tense and I'm wondering, should I have worn 3 or 4 or 5 shirts under my shirt, whatever. But I remember on those days, I will go back to God's words to Elijah, and I'll just hear God say, what are you doing here, Scotty? Feeling like you're stuck. Get out on that stage and be the man I've made you to be, and I will take care of the rest. That's faith. Next Sunday, we're gonna be celebrating baptisms here in this room, and I can't think of a better way to say, God, I'm gonna trust you even though I'm uncertain. And it's not too late for you if you want to take that step, make that decision to sign up and be part of that. And if that's you, let us know on your Connect card, or you can reach out at northshore.church/baptism. Because here's the thing about anxiety, or learning to live with anxiety. The real goal in dealing with anxiety isn't finding peace. The goal is finding God. And if you look back at Elijah's story, the turning point is not when he found peace. I don't know if he ever found peace. The turning point in the story is when he found God, or better yet, when God found him. Because here's the thing about God. God will always find you in certainty and powerlessness. He'll always find you there. There's a woman in our church who's been caring for her husband for a number of years as he's been battling cancer. It's been a journey that's been filled with uncertainty and fear, but I've seen her all the way through it pray and choose faith and serve others. Well, some time ago, she was at a routine doctor's visit herself and found out that now she has cancer as well. I mean, talk about like being thrown into uncertainty. And I remember talking to her recently, and she just said, I just feel so afraid. Because what else could a person feel? But then I've marveled at how every day she keeps praying, she keeps serving, she keeps believing one day at a time. And I thought about that, her life, and I just think that's power, actually. That's power. And no, it doesn't look like a mighty wind or earthquake or fire, because the power of God in our lives rarely looks that way. Real power, real faith looks a lot more like a whisper from a weary and anxious soul saying, even though I'm not 100% certain, God, I will trust you 100%. And that's what I want to invite you to do today. To stand in the face of whatever uncertainties are before you and just say, even though I'm not 100% certain, God, I want to trust you 100%. So here's what I want to do. I just want to ask you if you'd all stand. If you're watching online, you do this. If you're able, please stand. You do this at home as well. And there's something about standing up and feeling your whole body that you need when you're facing uncertainty or worry. And then I'm going to ask you to do this right now. Just close your eyes and have your body be in a posture of receiving. It can be hands out, hands up. I'm also going to invite the prayer team to come forward. They'll be on both sides of the stage. And by the way, as we take this moment to pray and receive and be with God, to find the peace of Christ on us, the power of Christ rest on us, you're not powerless. You're not stuck in that chair. If you need prayer, or someone you know needs prayer, come forward, get up, go back to what you know. Just like Elijah. And for some of you, if you're standing there thinking, I don't even know this Jesus person, I don't even know what to do right now, here's what you can say. Jesus, even though I'm not 100% certain that you're real or you're there, for the first time, I'm just gonna say, yes, I'm gonna trust you 100%. You can do that right now. Just tell Jesus, yes, I'm gonna trust you 100% right now. Because the answer you need isn't about finding peace, it's finding God, and he's right here. And so Jesus, we pray now with our hearts, our bodies, ready to receive from you whatever you have. And even if we don't feel freedom from anxiety, even if we walk out of these doors still feeling anxious or uncertain, we can trust that your power is with us. We can trust that your faithfulness is with us. And so Jesus, we trust you. We cast our eyes on you. We look only to you now, because true peace isn't a feeling, it's a person, and it's you. Amen.
Turn your grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. And the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. To Jesus I surrender. All to Him I freely give. I will ever love and trust Him in His presence daily live. I surrender all. I surrender all to Thee, my blessed Savior. I surrender all. I surrender all. I surrender all to Thee, my blessed Savior. I surrender
We're going to keep singing together, but if you need prayer today, I just want to invite you up again. God invites us to ask Him for what we need. He wants to move in our life, but our part in that is to come to Him and ask, to admit that we need help, to admit that we can't do this alone. So if you're in that spot today and you need some prayer, please come on up. We'd love to pray for you. And let's just keep singing and asking God to be with us in this moment. We fix our eyes on Him. You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies till all my fears are gone. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name. I've been born again to your family. Your blood flows through my veins. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Sing this over your life today, that I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Yes, I am. And I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. It's who I am. It's who I am. I am surrounded by the arms of the Father. I am surrounded by the songs of deliverance. We've been liberated from our bondage. We're the sons and daughters. Let us sing our freedom, singing, oh, 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 oh. Come on, sing out with us. Oh, oh, you split the sea so I can walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. Oh, you split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. Oh, we sing that I am a child of God. It's who we are. And I am a child of God. One more time. I am, come on, a child of God. Just as we were singing that, there's that line, you split the sea so I can walk right through it. And what that's referencing is an Old Testament story of Moses leading the Israelites out of captivity in Egypt, out of bondage in Egypt, slavery. And I was just reflecting back on 8 years ago
when I made the decision myself to get baptized, and just how this Old Testament story was just playing itself out in my life 8 years ago. Or through a group just like this that met on a Sunday morning, God made a way to part this sea out of my life of sin and darkness and brokenness, and I got to experience God parting that sea for me. And just through that act of baptism, literally I just remember like going down under the water and just coming back up, and not only taking a step in my relationship with Jesus that Jesus himself modeled and took, but getting to experience that same faith that it took for the Israelites to step into those parted waters. Same faith of leaving behind what was behind them, all of the things that Egypt represented to them, and walking forward through these parted waters into the promised land. And I just don't want you guys, if you're in this moment and experiencing God just speaking again, that moment of baptism was just a life-changing experience for me. Totally, not only just shifted the trajectory of my life, but just got to experience my relationship with Jesus in a way that I couldn't have imagined. And again, we're doing baptisms next Sunday. And if you had just felt God speaking to you, maybe your heart's beating a little fast, you know this is something that God has put on your heart to do, don't miss this opportunity. Next week can be the week where you get to experience something generations and generations of people have modeled after what Jesus did himself. Just this outward expression of saying, I believe, and the impact it can have on your life and people around you is unbelievable. So please, if you have any questions about baptism, or if it's just something you want to talk about, you can come up to the front here. We have people that would love to chat with you. You can come over to the station that said, I said yes, and we would love to pray with you, talk with you about it. Thank you guys so much for being here today. Next week is going to be an incredible Sunday. I'm telling you guys, lives are going to be changed and you are not going to want to miss it. It is going to be a party. So we would love to see you back here next Sunday as well. Thank you guys for joining us online. We'll see you guys right back here next week. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.